Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the new Tier 8 Japanese heavy tank, the Type 63. So this tank is it is released in this draw where you need 3 number 11 lottery balls to unlock it, since after that everything is very cheap in terms of resources. But getting 3 number 11s is quite difficult, considering there are 31 different numbers you could possibly get, and the lottery machines aren't exactly very cheap. So the chances you see this tank on the battlefield, again, quite low, but maybe not quite as low as the FVE Defender. But Type 63, at the moment, not really worth getting, as it is just an expensive purchase. But this tank is Tier 8 Japanese heavy tank. It's got solid armor, it's got great mobility for a heavy tank impact, the best among all Tier 8 heavies except for maybe the AMX 5100, and it has also a great gun. So let's just get into the stats. Of course, on my website currently there is no review for this tank, as Wargaming kind of jumped this and the FVE Defender on our accounts yesterday as they released. And of course, making a video review is much faster and easier than doing a website review, just because I have to try and put what is shown into words rather than just showing. So yeah, no review for the moment, but I will add one later, and it will be in the link in the video description of this video when that is ready. But here we can see the armor of the Type 63. You can see against standard ammo 225 AP, it's actually got very solid armor. The upper plate is between 270 and 290 millimeters thick, 270 being the bottom area, 290 being closer to the top, which is very good upper plate armor actually, and most premium ammo in Tier 8 from heavy tanks can't go through the upper plate of this tank. And by the way, this tank using improved assembly, not enhanced armor, so it does actually still get better than this. Next, the turret front is 330 to 350 millimeters thick, which is one of the best in Tier 8 as long as you are facing it towards the enemies, because as soon as you do turn the turret, it of course becomes weaker just because of how it is angled. And other than this, you can see not really any weak points on the turret or the upper plate area, other than maybe very small slivers under the gun and at the back of the turret. The lower plate is of course weak, only 130 millimeters, which does mean HESH goes through very easily. So you do have to watch out for that a little bit. But switching to premium ammo, you can see against 265 APCR, of course the upper plate does become a bit weaker and penetrable because it is only 270 at its weakest point, and of course this being 265 APCR with normalization will be able to go through that at least 50% of the time, but you can make it better with enhanced armor. But you can see that it does become a bit weak, but of course as long as you're angling it, then all is fine. You can see of course here the turret armor as well, when it is turned away from the enemies, how it does become weak on those turret cheeks and easily penetrable to premium ammo, just because now it's more flat than it is angled as when it is facing the enemy straight on. But when using gun depression, you can see 12 degrees, very good gun depression actually, but you can see now there are actually weak points on the turret. The rear of the turret, because you are using so much gun depression, does actually sort of prop itself up and does become more of an easy to hit weak point. So what you want to do ideally is to raise the gun up to hide those weak points, but you can see other than that there's not really anywhere enemies can penetrate. The upper plate is 500 millimeters thick, turret cheeks are 400 millimeters thick, and essentially they can't hit anywhere else as long as you aren't showing your lower plate like I am in these images. But getting a screenshot with 12 degrees of gun depression is sort of hard on Copperfield. But here we can see the Type 63 using its full 12 degrees of gun depression, and you can see sort of what you want to do to hide that. You don't want to really raise the gun up too much because the gun mantlet isn't exactly super strong, so you do just want to raise it a bit, as little as possible, so it is still not easy for enemies to penetrate the gun mantlet. But as long as those rear parts are hidden, once you take a shot, just raise your gun slightly, and then suddenly you are completely impenetrable on both the upper plate and the turret, even if enemies have very high penetration like 330 heat, sorry, 330 APCR for example. If it's heat, of course, enemies will need more penetration to go through, more like 400. So yeah, essentially once you've hidden those weak points at the back of the turret and you are using your full gun depression, you can't really be contested on a ridgeline. But side armor of this tank, 70 behind the tracks. Tracks themselves are 20, and the area above the tracks is 80. Overall, side armor is okay, but it is on the weaker end for heavy tanks. Also, of course, you do have this whole shoulder thing, so I wouldn't recommend that you side scrape, just because that isn't strong at all and you can't really angle it. But moving to the gun, this tank mounts a 105mm gun. Its ammo is AP/HE, its penetration is 219, 262 and 60. So actually a very nice ammo loadout and very good penetration. 219 on standard is fairly average, but premium of 262 on AP is actually very impressive and very nice penetration, as of course it is AP and it normalizes 5 degrees, which helps so much against angled armor as long as it's under the auto ricochet. And that 60 on HE is also quite nice penetration, as generally HE has 53, so an extra 7mm there for a tier 8 heavy tank. Damage is 320, 290, 400, and this is above average alpha damage. Most 105s do 310, so that 10 extra is fairly nice. But what's more important is this premium. Generally, tanks with 320 do 270 on their premium ammo. This tank does 290, so while it's not the crazy sort of high damage premium AP as most Japanese tanks, it is still a slightly increased damage amount for a 320 alpha gun, doing 20 more than average on its premium ammo. And of course, HE 400, that's just average, nothing impressive at all. Damage per minute is 2134 for a 9.0 second reload, so DPM is definitely on the low side, but it is a definitely needed balancing factor. Gun handling is quite good, 3.2 seconds aim time, or 3.4 with refined gun. Base aim time is great, 2 seconds. Dispersion is decent, 0.344, and gun handling is fairly average. It may look good, all being under 0.2, but notice this turret reverse dispersion, 0.18. It's much worse than most other heavy tanks, which generally have between 0.12 or 0.14. Some of them even have 0.1. Generally, this isn't the best gun handling just because of that on-turret traverse dispersion being quite a bit worse than the usual tier 8 heavy tank. But still, it's not terrible gun handling either. On top of this, great shell velocities of 1100 meters per second on all shells, and of course that amazing 12 degrees of gun depression, which is all around the entire tank, and even on the rear it's a decent 7 degrees, which means you can actually shoot while running away from enemies, which a lot of tanks actually struggle to do. But overall, this is a great gun. You do have to stop to aim, of course, because that gun handling isn't that impressive. Your dispersion isn't that amazing, it's fairly average, and your aim time is actually quite good, so you do have to stop to aim to make sure your shots do hit. But once you get aimed in, it is quite nice. On top of that, this tank has combat stabilization, so when you are just sitting hull down, not moving much, your gun barely balloons out at all. And on top of this, it's of course got the great ammo and just great shell velocities, which make this overall a very nice, consistent gun to use. But mobility. This tank, 44 kilometers top speed, which is the best in tier 8 of any heavy tank, except for the AMX 50-100. That is, in terms of base top speed, this tank can achieve 44, which is by far the best, except for the AMX. Reverse speed isn't so impressive, 14 is just average for a heavy tank, so it's not fast in reverse, but it is decent still. Acceleration rate is 18.6, which is amazing. It's one of the best for any heavy tank in the game, and just 18.6 is so high for a heavy. On top of this, 44 ton weight, meaning it is quite light, you can't ram that well. And on hard terrain, its acceleration is 16.9, and that is due to having 1.1 terrain resistance on hard terrain. So you don't get the full 18.6, but still 1.1 on hard terrain giving you 17 is still a very fast heavy tank. On top of this, 43.5 degrees traverse, very fast traverse for a heavy tank. Acceleration on medium terrain is 14.3 horsepower, which is again still very fast for a heavy tank. It does allow you to reach your 44 top speed. Traverse is less impressive, but still, for a heavy tank that is still pretty good, as generally at this tier most heavies have between 28 and 30 degrees of traverse, so almost 34, definitely not bad. And yeah, overall great mobility for a heavy tank that doesn't have paper armor. This tank's armor is still good, unlike PC where its hull is complete paper and the tank is fast. This tank is fast, but the hull isn't paper and it does still have very solid armor. But next, moving to consumables and everything, I run this tank with engine power boost just because I am still gauging whether this tank has weak modules or not. And in fact, I've just thought of it, yes it does. This tank's engine gets damaged a lot as the transmission is just behind the lower plate. In fact, it might not be the transmission. No, it is the transmission. Just behind the lower plate, which means, just like a lot of German tanks, if enemies do shoot you here, it does mean that your engine has a high chance to get damaged, and it has happened a fair few times in battle, so I am going to switch that out for repair kit. Next, in terms of the provisions, everything is pretty normal here. Ammo loadout, this tank of course carry a fair bit of premium AP as it is quite nice to use, definitely useful. However, your standard ammo will still be your main ammo type, as this tank doesn't have that crazy damage on premium unlike other Japanese tanks. But equipment wise, I'd use gun rammer because I find the penetration on this tank is perfectly fine. 219 is just average for a heavy tank, but 262 on AP, premium AP is very good, and you don't struggle to penetrate enemies at all. So on top of that, this tank's DPM is definitely not impressive. 2100, that's more like the Löwe, which is definitely on the lower end of tier 8 105mm DPM. Especially consider Chisa, Tiger II, those tanks have around 2500, a tank like the M4 Yo that has technically 2600, and then of course the newly buffed Bisonte has 2800, so consider that these other tanks with essentially the same alpha have just 300 to 700 more DPM than you. I'd use gun rammer. Next, defense system and improved optics. Engine accelerator, just because I really want to be able to utilize that great top speed of this tank, and its traverse speed is perfectly fine. Next, improved assembly. I would definitely use this as this tank's HP is low. 1700 is the lowest you can have for a tier 8 heavy, and using enhanced armor, yes, it makes the turret better, yes, it makes the upper plate better, especially noticeable against tier 8 heavy tank premium ammo. However, when is that actually going to be useful? When you are sitting on flat ground behind cover? Sure, but that is not extremely often, and a lot of the times when you are on flat ground behind cover, for example on Himmelsdorf, you can angle the hull a bit without exposing your hull shoulder, which does make suddenly the upper plate is no longer penetrable. So I don't find enhanced armor to actually be that needed, because for one, the turret doesn't need it, two, the upper plate is already very good, and the only benefit you get from it is if you are on flat ground, facing the enemy head on, and not able to angle your hull at all, which is just an extremely niche situation which I find doesn't happen almost ever, so I will use improved assembly. Next, gun laying drive, just to take advantage of this tank's good aim time. While it does have already great shell velocity, you could min-max on that, but I personally wouldn't. Next, vertical stabilizer. This is down to personal choice. Remember, this tank does have the combat stabilization mechanic, which does mean that when you are sitting hull down and not moving much, well, under 15 kilometers per hour, your gun essentially doesn't bloom much. However, you do also have to consider this tank's on-turret traverse dispersion is 0.18, which is quite poor, and the on-turret reverse dispersion is not affected by the combat stabilization mechanic. So, you know, maybe you want to use vertical stabilizer. It also does help you when you are going faster than 15 kilometers per hour. On the other hand, this tank already has great aim time, and you could definitely use refined gun to sort of balance that out and make this tank just very accurate with good aim time. And of course, combat stabilization helps out when you are moving slowly. So either of these is good. I would say use them both and figure out what you like. Refined gun is definitely a very viable choice considering the mechanic on this tank. Next, toolbox and consumable delivery system. So I do have 3 replays in this tank to show. 2 of them aren't so much for showing, oh, this tank is great, or, you know, oh, this tank does so well in this situation. It's more so about showing just specific parts of the vehicle. So in this first battle, you'll see it is on vineyards, and in fact I got vineyards quite a few times while playing this tank. I do want to point out, playing this tank is not going to be so great in terms of bouncing shots when there are multiple enemies at different angles on the map, and I'll try to show that in a minute in this battle. But you'll see, with me being the only heavy tank on this one, I'm not going to go into town or anything. I'm going to go right towards the middle, and you can see I have activated my engine power boost, and you can tell that this tank has got quite nice mobility, and I am able to get into position quite quickly for a heavy tank. And of course this is also on medium terrain where my mobility isn't exactly the best possible. But you can see now I am here at the ridge. But I do not know where that shot goes, but you can see the issue I have here, right? So I am sitting here on the ridge, yes. The enemy Annihilator and heavy tanks are in front of me. They may appear here later, which of course does mean that they can shoot me when my turret is turned towards, for example, the Annihilator right now. You can see the angle that it has. The Scorpion G is over towards this area, and you can see that the angle he has on my turret over here if I do poke up, and you can see the top of my tank just poking over there. So this tank does definitely have issues with facing multiple enemies. You need all the enemies in front of you in the same spot, and I found that out the hard way by playing on vineyards 3 or 4 times, going to this position and getting absolutely destroyed because there were enemies in the town and there was an enemy in front of me with a strong turret, usually a T-34 or another Type 63. So not ideal when you have multiple enemies at multiple angles, because your turret is only strong when it is facing forward. But here you can see I am now, well, hold down against these enemies. I'm not able to use the gun depression because, of course, it's essentially flat ground here. But you can see I was able to bounce the Annihilator's premium ammo there. But now you'll see the issue, as I do turn the turret for the Panzer 58, and then the RHM-BWT shoots me on the side. Now the Panzer going around me does mean that I take an extra shot from the Annihilator. But here you can see, with the Panzer 58, he doesn't quite have the gun depression to shoot down on my lower plate, and he's forced to bounce off this tank's strong upper plate or turret. And the Annihilator, he does penetrate too, but he does also bounce one off. And you can see here, sure, I'm not in the best position, but you can see the armor is actually holding up. I do have now 317 hit points, but I have bounced a fair few shots, and I am hull down against these enemies here. You can see that Progetto, he shot premium ammo, which is 260 APCR, and not able to go through. He does now try to rush me, but I do put in one more shot there. Now the Panzer 58 comes forward, but he once again bounces off. The Annihilator also comes forward, but doesn't have the gun depression to deal with me. And then that Progetto tried to HE me, but probably hit the upper plate or turret, and did no damage. But you can see there, maybe not the most ideal situation, but you can see that the armor held up. My lower plate was hidden just purely because the enemies didn't have enough gun depression to shoot down on it, and I did manage to bounce quite a bit of damage in that battle. Sure, maybe not the best bit of gameplay, especially as at that point I hadn't figured out that at bottom vineyards. Maybe not the best for this tank when there are multiple enemies, but still, you can see how the armor worked there. The next battle is on Faust. I did want to show this one as there is an enemy type 63, so you can see sort of this tank's armor and how it does in a live situation as the enemy. But of course, with a fair few heavy tanks on the enemy team, I'm sort of expecting them to go towards base C or D. However, that doesn't happen. But of course, with me going to the medium side, you can see how this tank's good mobility and great top speed do actually benefit it. And that top speed isn't to be underrated. Consider tanks like the 122 TM, the Titan 54D, the Cobra. They're all tanks with 45 kilometers top speed. This tank has 44, so you definitely can keep up with mediums. You definitely can play a heavier role, especially when the game is fairly fast-paced. You can actually keep up with your allied mediums and give them good support. But you can see here, I'm going towards base A just because I can use my gun depression here. And of course, going fully hull down. There's an enemy T-34-1, which of course has a great turret, but this tank, I do manage to hit his cupola there. You can see the enemy Type 63 poking up. You can see there, with his gun depression being used, you can penetrate the areas at the back of the turret, but I raised my gun to try and not let him do that to me. But here, the T-34-1 does just keep pushing forward, and I'm fully hull down, meaning he just has absolutely no chance of dealing with me at all. So, unfortunate for him, he does just go down in 4 shots against me. However, you can see we don't quite have so much support on this side, and there are so many enemy heavy tanks just right there. At this point I was kind of thinking whether or not I should fall back, but I did see my allies are kind of pushing around, so maybe I could stay here and sort of provide a distraction, right? Make enemies stay on this side a bit longer and not just push all the way around. So I do decide to not fall back. And you'll see here now the enemies are capturing base A. The Type 63 is pushing forward, and you can see that, of course, when the hull is turned like that, when the hull shoulder is showing, when the turret is turned like that, this tank does have a fair few weak points which are penetrable. You can also see the side armor there. This tank can't over angle. The best it can do is be at the 70-degree auto ricochet. But here, unfortunately, I'm being rushed by the 2 enemy heavy tanks, the T-34 and the Type 63, and unfortunately, in this situation, both of them are going to be hull down when they push. You can see there, the newly buffed T-34 upper plate does mean I have to use premium ammo to deal with him. But 2,800 damage, not a terrible result for a tier 8 heavy, and you were definitely able to see the enemy Type 63 in terms of their armor profile. However, maybe not the best use of their armor, but you can see the issues with this tank when you are not sitting hull down, when you're not really angling correctly. Of course, he was on the move, so he wasn't really doing anything wrong. But yeah, in that battle, 2,800 damage blocked. Sorry, not blocked, dealt. Didn't block much damage, but you can still see sort of how this tank performs. Now, the final battle on Dead Rail. This is the one. This one shows sort of what this tank is all about. You can see in this battle use of mobility, use of the gun depression, the turret armor, and also the gun being quite consistent and working well. So, of course, Dead Rail, the perfect map to go towards the middle to use this tank's amazing 12 degrees of gun depression, which isn't to be underrated. No other tank at this tier has such good gun depression. And really, it is just so comfortable to use in terms of what positions you can kind of take. But here you can see this tank's good mobility. I am at the ridge already, and there is a T-34 crossing out in the open, so I do just put a shot into him. But there you can see again, I turned the turret to shoot the T-34. If there had been a big TD sniping at the back of the map, they could have hit the side of my turret, which of course not ideal considering it's big and flat. But here there's no enemies at the ridge, which is unfortunate. I really wanted to use this tank's 12 degrees of gun depression, but I can't. Here you can see I'm trying to take a shot on the Progetto. Bit of a lag there, so I do miss, as I thought he was going to reverse a bit more, but he doesn't. But you can also see the combat stabilization mechanic here. I am essentially just around 15 kilometers, and my gun is aiming in quite well. There's one thing I do want to point out. This tank's gun elevation is 5 degrees, and the reason for that is the back of the turret hits the hull. So even if Wargaming wanted to give it more gun elevation, they can't, because the back of this turret just would go all the way into the hull. So you can see here, terrible gun elevation. So in this situation I do see, oh, there's all the enemies are where this Chieftain and this IS-6 are, so I'm going to go back towards where the tank destroyers would usually be. Unfortunately, it does mean I do take a shot from the T-34, but I am going to be in a better position to deal with those enemies. And this Chieftain and IS-6, well done to them for surviving as long as they do, it's rather impressive. I don't know how that shot doesn't penetrate. It was premium AP on the front of the Tiger P, but of course, RNG, it does not go through. And you can see there, I had to turn the turret to shoot the Tiger P, and the enemies do just manage to penetrate through the side of the turret. So yeah, you do want to just be aiming it at the front. And you can see now, they're all aiming at me, but now they're not shooting, because they are trying to find what they can do against this tank's turret, but there's nothing they can do against this tank's turret when it is facing towards them. Also, those weak points on the top of the turret, not easy to hit when you are at a range like this. That's why I wasn't really raising my gun there. Unfortunately, Jagdpanther, a bit toxic that he died to flanking mediums, but oh well. You can see here the Progetto, had I hit that shot earlier, he would have been dead there, but luckily our IS-3 does finish him off. Now you can see against this Astron Rex, the T-34, I'm able to use this tank's combat stabilization mechanic against them, as I'm barely moving. My gun isn't blooming out that much, but you can see just turning the turret and nothing else, not moving the hull, this tank's gun dispersion does become still fairly noticeable just because of that on-turret traverse, which is quite poor. So you do have to watch out for that a bit. But you can see this tank is so nice for a situation like this, sitting hull down, able to use its good aim time and accuracy on the enemies. The only thing that's not the best, of course, is the DPM. If that T-34 had a bit higher top speed, or my reload had been a bit slower without adrenaline, I wouldn't have been able to kill him there, and we would have had one extra enemy to deal with. But you can see Astron Rex, he is reloaded, but he is not shooting me because I am hull down and he cannot do anything against me. And here you can see the good mobility of this tank. Other heavy tanks generally would be a bit more awkward to go chase out after a medium, but this one, with its great mobility, is very nice for chasing mediums. So you can see there a nice snapshot on him as well. I'm going to sit on base B because enemies do have a lot of cap points. You would have noticed in my Vickers MBT video I did this and it was a mistake, but in this one I don't think it is a mistake. That IS-6 and Chieftain have held on for so long, and I think they can keep going. So I'm going to push around now that the capture pressure is alleviated a bit and kill the Tiger 1. And now, 3 versus 1, despite this IS-3 being full hit points, he's not really going to stand too much of a chance. Nice fire on the IS-3 for an extra 100 damage, roughly. And now he's down to a one-shot. I am going to go for the ram just because it's the very end. He does take a bit of damage, but I do get the kill for 4 damage. But you can see there, that game, I did block a few shots, but not that many, just because when I was actually hull down, enemies just chose to not shoot at me, because of course that's the smart thing. Why would you waste your shot on a fully red turret, which you know you can't penetrate? But 4,000 damage dealt, 500 blocks from enemies, which did actually shoot at me, and of course because it was an ace with a high caliber, I did make a lot of credits. But yeah, Type 63. This is an incredibly good tank. How would I compare it? I'd say it's like the VK4502A, the Tier 8 German tech tree heavy tank. But of course, with just much better gun depression. This tank is mobile. It's got strong upper plate, strong turret armor. It's got similar DPM, but it's not got the gun depression. The Type just does have that gun depression, and it is just so flexible, so impressive. It's also comparable to like a T-32, for example, but this one is just much faster, much better gun handling, and overall accuracy. So yeah, the Type 63, overall a great all-rounder tier 8 heavy tank. There's not really any downsides. Sure, it's got the weak point on the lower plate on the back of the turret when you do use the gun depression, but so do a lot of other heavy tanks. This one just has as good armor as a lot of other heavy tanks while having amazing mobility and top speed, very good penetration, and amazing 12 degrees of gun depression. Just a bunch of advantages for this tank while not really having many downsides. Sure, its HP is quite low, 1700, but you can still work with that. And a lot of other tanks do also have 1700 or 1800 at tier 8. So yeah, Type 63, a great tank. In terms of how fun it is to play, I'd say it's not that interesting. Tier 8 105mm heavy tanks generally aren't the most interesting to play. However, with 12 degrees of gun depression, this one does offer a few unique traits in its gameplay and sort of how it plays. I think it'll be a very strong, very strong heavy tank in the hands of a great player, and even pretty decent in the hands of a bad player, just because, you know, its armor isn't worse than other heavies, its gun isn't worse than other heavies, and its mobility is certainly better than all other heavies. So yeah, a great tank, the Type 63. This one, unfortunately, it is in this stupid drawer, so not going to be easy to get. But if there is a chance in the future, definitely one to look out for if you do like hull-down gameplay with good gun depression and mobile, fast, heavy tanks. But yeah, that is it for the Type 63. Review will be up on the website maybe in a day or two. But yeah, thanks for watching.